Today, I play as a lonely lamb who must defeat 4 evil bishops to release the one who waits from his chains. But first, am I able to raise a bustling cult of loyal followers who are unable to take care of themselves? Holy moly, look at the size of that thing. Who has even done that? Well, there's only one way to find out. I played 100 days of Cult of the Lamb. My journey as a cult leader started out pretty rocky when I was led before the bishops of the old faith, Leshy, Hecate, Calamar and Shamaru. They told me that I was the last of my kind and that I was to be slaughtered just like the rest. And with their final message, the executioner brought down his axe. But just when I thought it was all over, I was resurrected by the one who waits. Although there was a condition, I must start a cult in his name. Yes, or absolutely. Absolutely. With my decision made, I was given this cool looking hat and returned back to the land of the living to take my revenge. I was then greeted by a fellow named Ratau who told me that he had been instructed to lead me to safety, instructing me to carry on throughout the dungeon. It wasn't long before I ran into Ratu once again, this time where another poor creature was about to be sacrificed. But I couldn't just stand there knowing the pain all too well. So I took care of the bishop's goons and freed the poor fellow, sending him through this wormhole. Ratau then informed me that he would lead me to a temple that had fallen into ruins, where I would begin to build our new cult. So I jumped through the wormhole and arrived at our new home. There, I found Nombre, the poor fellow I had rescued earlier, and after giving him a cool new look, I indoctrinated him into the cult. I was then tasked with giving him a job. I chose for him to chop down the trees and collect wood. Ratau then informed me that I would need to feed my followers, but to do so, I would need to craft a cooking fire. So I got to work chopping down the nearby trees and collecting the stone, eventually gathering enough to build the cooking fire. I then cooked a meal for Nombre, and Ratau then informed me that I would need to build a shrine, but first I would need more followers and gold, both of which could be found when crusading through the lands of the old faith. So with the help of Nombre, I was able to pray at this altar, opening the doors to Darkwood. Once inside, I collected the blade that was waiting for me, and began my crusade, killing anything in my path. Venturing on, I come across this TP looking fella named Clawneck, who gave me the option of 2 tarot cards. These cards are like power-ups. I then chose the card that meant that I would receive double the health when healing. Pressing on further, I was interrupted by Leshy, who was rather confused as he had just seen me put to the blade. Well, newsflash Leshy, I'm alive and I'm coming for you, bitch. Eventually making it to the final room, I was once again confronted by Leshy, who turned one of his goons into this ugly looking creature. Thankfully, he was easily taken care of, and at this point I thought to myself that this game was going to be a cakewalk, but oh boy was I wrong. Hey! Oh, look at him, he's got a little bump on his head. After sending Amdusius back to the cult, I was rewarded with a chest containing a moon necklace, which meant that followers never slept. You'll be glad to know that I forgot all about it and ended up using it on like day 70. But with that, I had finished the crusade and managed to light up one of the segments of this door. Come on, bumpy head. Returning back to the cult, I indoctrinated Amdusius. And then Ratau appeared once again, tasking me with building a shrine so that I could collect devotion from my followers once complete. I was rewarded with another follower. Collecting the devotion from the shrine, I had managed to level up and unlock the temple. This required 5 stone and 15 wood, so I got to work. Looking for a quick influx of wood, I decided to chop down this tree. Little did I know that I would spend the next 2 minutes chopping away at this thing. Thankfully it was worth it, gaining another 15 wood for my efforts. With the temple now built, Ratau informed me that I could hold both sermons and rituals inside. After holding what only could be described as a banger of a sermon, I had managed to level up permanently, gaining half a health. And with that, we had managed to finish the tutorial and our 100 days officially began. I then headed back inside Darkwood, this time receiving this battle axe, which was a little bit slower than the dagger, but did much more damage. I then ran into Ratau once more, and he informed me that the one who waits wanted him to pass on a special ability. Oh? He's got blood coming out of his eyes. Ratau then told me to take my new crown ability for a spin, and tasked me with shooting down 5 target dummies. He then informed me that the special ability used Fervor, which could be collected killing monsters within the crusade. A little further into the crusade, I came across Fornius, who had 3 items I could choose from. Eventually, I decided to go with the Commandment Stone fragment. I also received a tarot card. I then had another pleasant run-in with Leshy, who could apparently smell my fear, but with the amount of babbling he was doing, I think it was him who was fearful, not me. He then spawned even more of his goons, but these were easily taken care of. Running into Clawneck once again, I chose the tarot card that granted me an additional blue heart. I was then greeted by Harrow, who gifted me 3 Commandment Stone fragments, meaning that I was now able to complete my first stone. Eventually, I made it to the final room, where I was to take on Valafar, who somehow managed to dodge this absolute missile. Thankfully, he was pretty easily taken care of, as his main ability was these slow-moving fireballs, although he did manage to get me down to half health. Yes, there we go. I thought I was going to die. While returning to my cult, I was once again paid a visit by the one who waits, who told me he will be watching my every move and not to disappoint him. Kind of sounds like my boss. While indoctrinating Valafar, I noticed he has the trait Royal Pooper, which means he only poops gold. With the cult now growing, I decided to cook up a few more meals. and then declared a new doctrine, the bonfire ritual. This would require 25 bones and 10 wood. The bones was something we had yet to come across, but Ratau informed me that they would be found while crusading. But first, after holding another sermon, I had leveled up once more, this time choosing to unlock bane weapons, which increased the possibility that bane weapons would have a chance of poisoning my enemies. I then headed back into Darkwood in search of the bones so that we could hold a bonfire ritual. I was once again interrupted, but not just by Leshy this time. He has decided to bring along Heket and Calamar. At this point, I think I'm the talk of the town. Before I could make my way further through the crusade, I was left with no option but to free this poor rabbit from execution. Pressing on, I then had another strange conversation with Harrow. I'll be honest, this guy doesn't talk much sense. See no evil, speak naughty, hear nothing, think none. With that awkward conversation out of the way, I carried on, eventually making it through to the final room, where awaited Barbatos, whose main ability was erupting these spikes out of the ground, but these were easily dodged and I was able to take care of him with relative ease.
Yeah, Barbatos.
I then sent him through the wormhole back to the cult and was rewarded with a skull necklace, which meant the follower who was wearing it would live an unnaturally long life. I now only had one segment left of the door. Upon my return, I was once again paid a visit by the one who waits, who gave me a new doctrine, allowing me to read the thoughts of my followers. With my followers currently having nowhere to sleep, I unlocked this skill allowing me to craft sleeping bags and began to place them down. Amdusius then told me that the cult was disgusting and that I must clean the place up. Surely it's not the job of a cult leader to do this kind of stuff, but there you go. So I got to work cleaning up the poop around the base, earning my first broom upgrade, as well as coming across Valafar's golden poop, which in fact rewarded me with gold coins. Keep up the good work, buddy. On the morning of day 4, I had managed to gather enough bones so that I decided to hold the bonfire ritual, and declared a new doctrine, the feasting ritual. I was once again paid a visit by Ratau, who informed me that he was old and weary, but suggested that I pay him a visit at his home, thus unlocking a new area, the Lonely Shack. We now had 5 followers, so I placed down another sleeping bag. I then headed to the Lonely Shack, taking Ratau upon his offer, where he introduced me to a game of Knucklebone, which I easily won, gaining another tarot card in the process.
My god, 52!
But I think he conned me, because the minute I played for gold, this guy turned into a pro, losing twice in a row. Returning to the cult, I had unlocked another skill point, allowing me to unlock the farming bundle. I then spent the rest of the night placing down crop plots. The next morning, Amdusius informed me that it was time to name my cult, eventually going with the Cult of the Slam. Honestly, it sounded cooler at the time. Performing another sermon, I had once again leveled up, allowing me to unlock another skill, which increased the starting level of weapons when I began a crusade, as well as upgrading the cult to level 2.
What we got now? Oh, it looks even worse.
Returning to Darkwood once again, I run into Leshy, but this time he told me that he would be waiting for me in his temple. But before I could take on Leshy, I freed another creature and then ran into Ratau looking all old and withered, whining about a lost love, poor guy. It turns out this crusade was full of surprises, as I had once again run into another interesting character, this time the fisherman, unlocking another location, the Pilgrim's Passage. But I eventually managed to make my way to take on Leshy, who turned into this ugly looking creature. Oh my god. The size of him, who turned out not to be as easy as I thought. Eventually dying in the process, this would become the first of many.
No!
And just when it couldn't get any worse, I was summoned upon the one who waits once more. But expecting to be told that I was shit, I was pleasantly surprised when he gave me a prep talk before returning me to the land of the living. Once back at the cult, I took care of a few chores, repairing the beds, watering the crops, and cleaning up the ridiculous amount of poop. Honestly, these creatures have no shame. The cult's hunger was pretty low, so I decided to hold a feast, and then paid a visit to the fisherman, who gave me a fishing rod and tasked me with catching a crab, lobster, octopus, and a squid. I managed to catch most with ease, but the octopus wasn't as easy to catch. I then handed over the 3 items I had managed to catch and was rewarded with a talisman fragment for each item. I then headed on into the lighthouse where I met this crazy fella who tasked me with lighting up the lighthouse. So I placed in 15 wood into the fireplace, and just like that, there was light, to which he was very happy about. Returning to the cult, I had once again managed to level up, this time unlocking vampiric weapons before indoctrinating another follower. I then returned to Pilgrim's Passage to fish throughout the night in search of the octopus, to which I had no luck. The next morning, I held another sermon, unlocked another perk, and accepted a quest from Nombre to make him a bowl of grassy gruel. Turns out he doesn't like it after all. I then returned to Pilgrim's Passage to try catch the elusive octopus, but once again had no luck. With another fragment stone completed, I unlocked the Doctrine Faithful trait, which meant cult followers generated devotion 15% faster. I then repaired the beds once again. Honestly, what are these guys doing in these beds? With another skill point available, I this time unlocked the missionary, allowing me to send followers on quests. Gather resources before cooking up more meals for my followers, burning some in the process. I then showed Nombre some love, which increased his loyalty, and then spent the rest of the night fishing. Nombre once again had another quest. This time he wanted me to recruit 2 starving followers, and of course I accepted. The more the merrier. I then placed down a demonic summoning circle, which I rarely used in these 100 days, and unlocked another half a health permanently. Returning to Darkwood once again, I came across my first rare tarot card, and stumbled across someone named Monch, who increased the loyalty of a follower of my choice, and of course I chose my boy Nombre. I then bought another follower of this guy Helob, for a ridiculously low price of 2 gold. That's right, we have now progressed to buying followers. I then made my way down to the path to take on Leshy once again, this time making light work of him, gaining myself my first Heart of the Heretic. I was then summoned to the One Who Waits, once more for another chit chat, before returning to the cult where I was greeted with open arms for my victory.
We're all happy, look. I think.
The cult hunger was low once again, so I made up a few meals, and then used the Heart of the Heretic to unlock a hunger perk which allows me to eat a bowl of food once per crusade. Heading back into the crusade hall, a chain broke free on the middle door, leaving 3 remaining. Praying at the altar with my fellow followers, once again I was able to unlock the door to Anura, where I was greeted this time by Hecate, who was not best pleased as I had just killed her brother, and in return decided to make Amdusius starve. Pressing on, I run into Clawneck once again, this time choosing an extra heart of health. I had managed to make my way to the end of the crusade with relative ease, this time coming up against Gussian, who was far more powerful than I expected, easily killing me.
Oh, wow.
I then received another pep talk for my troubles. The recent deaths had caused my faith and hunger to become pretty low, so I decided to hold a feast once again, which in turn raised both my faith and hunger.
Everyone needs a bit of food.
I finished the day by placing down a lumberyard, as wood was starting to become hard to come by. The next morning I indoctrinated another member into the cult, and turned Norna into a demon.
Oh no, he's been converted into a demon.
I then expanded the crop plot some more, before cooking up some grassy gruel, which didn't go down too well as it made Bajul sick. Thinking it couldn't be so bad, I decided to try some for myself. Turns out it's not very nice after all. I then collected more devotion from the shrine and leveled up once more, this time unlocking the refinery. I'd managed to forget to record day 14, but on day 15 Norna told me that she could feel her bones creaking.
Oh no, he's got old.
I then decided to return to Darkwood, where I was once again greeted by Harrow, who informed me that this world would now be harder to progress through. I also come across this crazy looking creature named Chimak, who granted me the ability to use relics, which are basically a time-gated special ability.
Oi.
After collecting the relic from Chimak, I headed on deeper into the crusade, but of course I ended up dying. By this point I had died far more times than I was comfortable to admit. Returning back to the cult, the hygiene was at an all-time low, and Yartree was ill, so I sent him to bed and got to work cleaning up the endless amounts of poop. Once the base was taken care of, I headed out on another crusade, but first I bought another follower from Helob. Once back in Anura, it took me a while to work out that I had to kill these little fellas in an order of the number above their heads. I eventually managed to make it to the end, to take on Gussian, who was pretty easy to kill after all. I was paid a visit once again by the One Who Waits, who gave me a new doctrine that allowed me to sacrifice followers. So that gave me an idea. Norna was going to die anyway, so why not sacrifice her for the greater good?
I feel so bad.
It just so turns out the cult was pretty bloodthirsty, and I was rewarded with 30 faith, allowing me to unlock Might of the Devout 2. With all that killing, the group had worked up a hunger, so I made as many meals as I could, and then unlocked the janitor station, hoping this would fix the poop situation, but first I would need consecrated wood. So I finally got round to placing down the refinery and queued up the materials required. While waiting for the items to be crafted, I headed over to Pilgrim's Passage to do some fishing.
What is that? Oh, I unlocked a relic.
Where I caught a relic, and eventually the elusive octopus.
Yes! Finally!
And with that I received another piece to the Holy Talisman, which turned out to be a token to unlock different buffs. I chose the one that meant after each kill my damage would increase by 5%, but it also meant that damage taken dealt double. This turned out to be a massive mistake, as I'm useless at dodging attacks. Back in Anura, I run into this little angry looking mushroom fella, who told me that he was searching for menticide mushrooms and unlocking the next area, the Spores Grotto. Pressing on further, I was once again paid a visit by the Old Faith, who told me that I was to bow or I would regret it. But of course I refused.
No thank you.
I ended up dying before I could make it to the end of this crusade. This would become a common occurrence. Recently a few followers had become ill, so I decided to unlock the healing bay, hoping that this would help. The consecrated wood was now finished, so I placed down the janitor station in the top corner out of the way. I then headed over to meet Sozo at Spores Grotto, who asked me to give him 10 mushrooms, and it just so turns out that I had exactly 10. So I handed them over, and in return he gave me another talisman fragment. He then asked for another 20 mushrooms, but I had none left, so he would have to wait for now. But before leaving, I purchased another follower form from this portal, unlocking this cool frog fella. Barbatos then told me that he had always wanted to eat a meal made of poop and tasked me with making one. But not wanting to disappoint, I got on with cooking one up straight away. But as you could probably guess, it went down how you would imagine. I now had 2 cult members ill, so I crafted the healing bay and used the 15 camellia plants required to bring back one of the followers to full health. Back in Anura, I came across this crazy looking fella who wanted me to admit that I was stupid, but of course I denied such claim, and was insulted even further. Once at the end of the crusade, I faced Eligos, who thankfully was pretty easy to take care of, as you basically only had to dodge the moving fireballs.
Whoa, that was close.
Oh, that was well easy. Returning back to the cult, the one who waits informed me that he would like me to start sending in gifts, and in return he would pay me in gold, and then spawned in a chest within my base that I was able to sell the items into. With the poop situation still lingering, I decided to also unlock the outhouse. Fingers crossed this finally solves it, but of course it needed more consecrated wood. After another successful sermon, I was able to complete another doctrine stone, unlocking the grass eater trait, which couldn't have come at a better time as I was struggling to feed the growing numbers. Hebrew then asked me to let in a few creatures who were seeking shelter and ill. Not wanting to lose the 25 faith, I begrudgingly obliged. The plan was to send them straight to the healing bay, but it turns out I don't have enough camellia plants, so it would have to just be bed rest for now. But just when I thought it would be days until I have enough plants, I used some of the rainbow poop that I had collected earlier, and instantly it grew the plants, allowing me to collect enough to get Yarkady back on his feet. With hunger low once again, I cooked up as many grassy gruel bowls as I could, and as I was just about to head out on another crusade, we lost our first follower to old age.
Oh yeah, he's dead. Oh.
With no way of currently taking care of bodies, all I could do for now was wrap him up and place him down at the bottom of the base. The next morning, Valafar asked me to place some decorations around the base, but first I would need to bury Yartry.
Here lies Yarty.
I finally headed back into Nura once again, running into Hecate, who punished my followers once more for my defiance. And of course, once again, I died. I did tell you it was going to be a rocky ride. Returning back to the base, I placed down the decorations that Valafar requested earlier and held a sermon. Before the day come to an end, I unlocked another trait. The next morning, I placed down the missionary and was then interrupted by an angry-looking Amdusius, who told me I'm a fraud. Don't worry fella, I know the feeling. I then tried to re-educate him, but this barely moved the bar. I then decided to spread some positivity with a few followers to undo the damage that Amdusius has done. Thinking all was good, I then decided to head off on another crusade.
Oh, no, Barbatos.
Eventually I managed to get back into Anura, making it all the way to taking on Zeppa, who had managed to get me down to 1 health, but thankfully I was able to persevere, completing another commandment stone in the process.
Oh, I thought I was going to fail that one.
Upon my return, I found Andusius spreading hate about the cult to other followers, and with no way to stop him, he left me with no choice but to sacrifice him, which unfortunately lowered the faith of my followers, but it had to be done. Nombre then returned from his mission I sent him on earlier, but it turned out that he had failed and died in the process. Not wanting another situation like Amdusius, I unlocked the prison with my next available skill point. I then headed back into Anura once more, where I ran into Flinky, who invited me back to Rathaus for a game of knucklebone. And of course, I died once again. By this point, I was starting to get rather frustrated. Returning back to the cult, the faith was still pretty low, so I decided to hold another bonfire ritual. But just when I thought I'd got everything back to normal, Balafar, Nona died in the space of a few days. We had managed to lose 5 followers to old age. With the bodies now taken care of, I took a trip to play a game of knucklebone against Slinky, winning on our first game, gaining another tarot card. Back home, I took care of a few chores around the base and then held an enlightenment ritual, which will temporarily increase the devotion followers will generate. Yargri then asked me to find some flowers for Gussian. What a cutie, and of course, I couldn't say no. Heading straight into Darkwood in search of the flowers, where I ended up running into Rakasha and his wife for the first time, who I proceeded to attack, as it was rather funny to see his response, although at the time I didn't know it was his wife, and now I feel terrible. But in the end, he had enough, and he decided he was going to try and kill me.
He's got a pitchfork.
Of course I couldn't let that happen. Carrying on further, I come up against Witnessargis, who I made light work of with the 85% damage buff that I had managed to build up, completing another commandment stone and earning ourselves an Eye of the Witness. Back home, Eligos had started to descend, and although I did try to re-educate him, it didn't do too much, so I was left with no choice but to put him in prison, so that he could not turn my followers against me. Yargri was happy with the flowers that I collected for him for Gussian, but apparently it was not enough, and he requested that I make him a few bowls of splendid vegetable feast. I had yet to unlock this recipe, and somehow didn't throughout the whole 100 days. Returning to Pilgrim's Passage, I decided to unlock the 3 tarot cards that this stall had for sale. I then paid the lighthouse keeper another visit, who asked me to bring him 25 crystals. This was something I had not come across yet. I then decided to take a walk onto the dock, and suddenly a creature appeared from the water, asking me to give him fish, so I did, earning another talisman fragment in the process. The cult's hunger was once again rather low, so I held another feast before taking out the broomstick for another spin round the base. Returning back to Spore's Grotto, I handed in 20 mushrooms into Sozo, and in return I went on a magical mushroom trip. There's a first for everything, I suppose. Heading back into Anura, I ran into Monch once again, this time choosing the jewel to gain a level up. I then died once more. And it was at this point I decided to remove the yellow fleece and revert back to the normal one, as it was just too punishing. The next morning, Yarkady had been successfully re-educated, And so his sentence was now complete. I had once again leveled up, this time deciding to unlock the perk that meant 3 new curses would appear on my crusades. I then cooked up a few meals for the followers before declaring a new doctrine, which meant that followers would only lose 5 faith when a fellow follower died, which was perfect as they seemed to be dropping like flies at this point. I had also managed to unlock the next level of the shrine, upgrading it once again. Well, hey!
Here we go.
Back in Anura, I had managed to make it all the way to face Hecate, but I wasn't very confident as I had been taken down to only a single heart of health.
Whoa!
And of course, my lack of confidence was proven to be right when I was killed once more. By this point, I had lost track of how many times I had died. Back at the cult, I indoctrinated 2 new followers, treated Taitri at the medical tent, and then unlocked the 2 remaining crusades before heading into Anchor Deep, where I was paid a visit by Calamar, who wanted me to prove a point, summoning witness Argies and making him ill. Pressing on deeper into the crusade, I eventually managed to come against Salios. And guess what? I died once again. Looking for something to lighten the mood, I decided it would be good for the cult to have their own taste of the menticide mushrooms, and it seemed to go down a treat. Although it seemed to make Taitri rather angry, so he was rewarded with a visit to the local prison stall.
Why he just picks him up by his foot.
With that taken care of, I made some more meals. The next morning, I held a sermon and unlocked another skill point, allowing me to unlock the trait, Zealous Weapon. And of course, as I was heading out for another crusade, we lost another follower, this time Poppy.
Poppy has died of old age. No!
So I decided to stay home, taking care of a few chores, as well as trying to re-educate Taitri. Thankfully, on day 38, I made it into the crusade without losing another follower in the process, making it all the way through to face Hecate again. This time, with a full bill of health, I was able to defeat Hecate, gaining myself another Heart of the Heretic in the process. With all the recent deaths, it was no surprise that I fist bumped the air when he fell. Even the one who waits stopped by to bask in my glory. I had also managed to complete another commandment stone, and thus declaring a new doctrine, allowing me to ascend follower spirits. Spoiler, I didn't use this once, so I don't know what it did exactly. I also used the heart I had gained from Hecate to unlock another ability that allowed me to return to my home when inside a crusade. Returning back into Anchor Deep, I made my way through with relative ease, this time making it all the way to take on Salios. And as I now knew his attacks, it was rather easy to defeat him this time. While I was in a crusade, a few followers had fallen ill. So upon my return, I treated Majul at the medical tent, but I didn't have enough flowers to treat them all, so the remaining followers had to be ordered to bed rest. Taitri then asked me to recruit a dissenting follower, and honestly, if it wasn't for the prison, I would have chosen to lose the 25 faith. So I indoctrinated him into the cult, and before his feet could even land on the floor, he was dragged off to the prison. I had managed to find the required crystals for the lighthouse keeper in Anchor Deep, so I returned to hand them over, and in return, I received another follower form. And as I left the lighthouse, I realised my recent donations of crystal had done wonders to its appearance. Gussian then come to me with some damning information regarding Zeppa, who they apparently caught stealing from another cult member, and demanded that I imprison him. So I did just that to the surprise of Gussian, not sure why, because he just asked me to do it. But with no evidence, I decided to release Zeppa, as I was feeling quite bad about the whole situation. I then gifted him a moon necklace as an apology. While back inside Anchor Deep, I came across another crazed creature, who gave me the choice between war or peace. And of course, I chose peace, to which he snapped out of his angry haze. I was once again paid a visit by Calamar, who went on a rant about all the creatures sent before me, who were equally as pathetic, before summoning even more of my followers and making them ill. I then made it to the end of the crusade, where I was killed by Haberun. Upon my return to the land of the living, the cult's faith was rather low, so I decided to hold another bonfire ritual. I was then asked by Hetri to play a prank on Salios, by making him eat a bowl of poop. And although I thought it was a bit extreme, I couldn't turn down a good prank, so I made up a bowl of poop and waited for him to eat it. After collecting the devotion from the shrine, I had gained another skill point, deciding to unlock the farming station too, which allowed followers to harvest the crops. I then set the required materials to be crafted at the refinery and headed back into Anchor Deep, where I run into this fella who I was unable to work out how to break his shield and just managed to kill him by pure luck. Believe me, it took until day 70 odd to work out exactly how to counter his attack. I eventually made it to face Haberun, and this time I managed to defeat him with ease, returning to the base and declaring a new doctrine, allowing me to bribe my followers. Hetri then asked me to play another prank on Salios by making him eat poop once again. I'm starting to think Hetri has something against poor Salios, but not wanting to lose the faith, I obliged, and of course he fell for it again. The next morning I paid Ratau another visit and played Clunko and Bop in a game of Knucklebone, managing to defeat them on my first try. The lamb wins. Whee! Once again receiving another tower card. Hetri then asked me to send Salios to prison, which cemented my inkling that he had something against Salios, but of course I still accepted. I then went in search of a relic, from a clue provided by Clornek, eventually finding it behind the lighthouse, after a little Google search of course. Returning back to the base, I was able to upgrade the shrine, this time to its final state. Salios then requested that I take the cult on another spiritual journey using the menticide mushrooms. I then headed back into Anchor Deep where I spotted Monch again, this time deciding to level up Eligos, as well as meeting Plimbo for the first time, who told me I should pay him a visit at Smuggler's Sanctuary. Making it to the end of the crusade, I was this time greeted by Beelzebub, who basically just shot out a load of fireballs that I needed to dodge, managing to kill him on my first try. This meant that we now only had one final run for Anchor Deep before we came face to face with Calamar. Returning back to the base, I borrowed Zeppa, who had died while I was in Anchor Deep, and used my available skill points to unlock a kitchen, which allowed followers to cook their own meals, and Might of the Devout 4, increasing the starting crusade weapon levels. Helob was back once more with another follower, who I bought for 25 gold, although this one was sick, so maybe that explains the cheaper price. On the morning of day 46, I decided to visit Plimbo, and he informed me that he would purchase the eye that I had received about 20 days ago off me for a pretty penny. So of course I handed it over to him, completing another talisman stone in the process. While there, I purchased all the available tarot cards, and then returned to the base, selling off anything I didn't need to the one who waits. Using the talisman stone, I unlocked Fleece of the Fates, which upon entering Crusade drew 4 tarot cards, but I couldn't draw any more for the remainder of the Crusade. I then crafted the cooking station, which allowed followers to cook meals, but I still had to queue up the meals for them. Gussian then voiced his opinion on the base, telling me that it was nice so. I didn't think it was that bad, but I decided to place down a few decorations around the base, especially for him. I then headed back into Anchor Deep, where I was immediately paid a visit by Calamar, who told me I would not make it to his temple. With only one way to find out, I pressed on, running into Helob again, where I purchased another follower and then coming across this weird altar, surrounded by flowers. And after praying at the altar, I was rewarded with a temporary trait allowing my possessions to follow me in the event I died. It wasn't long before I arrived at Calamar's temple, where he turned into this crazy looking creature, and after a hard fought battle, he managed to defeat me. Thankfully, the altar I prayed at earlier meant that we didn't lose anything. But of course I was out for vengeance, and I immediately made my way back into Anchor Deep, where I run into Fernaus, who I received another commandment stone fragment from, before taking on Calamar once more. And this time he didn't stand a chance, killing him with only half a heart of health left. I was then greeted by my followers on our return, marking the halfway point through this 100 days. Woo 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 woo! Using the Heart of the Heretic, I unlocked a perk that allowed us to be resurrected when we died on a crusade, by sacrificing a follower.
What the hell?
And then something weird happened. A crown ascended into the sky, and with it, a serpent was spawned, unlocking the sin, as well as a new doctrine, Rite of the Wrath. Intrigued, I decided to hold a ritual, and well, they just kick the shit out of your base. But on the bright side, I gained my first sin serpent, which I was able to use to upgrade the temple.
Ah, we upgraded the holes.
I then unlocked a new skill, the drum circle, that was recently revealed when we unlocked the sin. I then made my way into Silk Cradle, where I came across a completely new weapon, the blunderbuss, which was basically a shotgun, but this ended up being my favourite weapon. Shamaru then stopped by and turned one of my followers against me, leaving me with no choice but to kill him, before coming up against Fogolo, who thankfully, with the recent addition of the blunderbuss and the higher starting weapon, was made far easier to defeat. Back at the base, I held another feast before heading back into the Silk Cradle, where I came across this weird looking sign unlocking Midas's cave. I then met Berith for the first time, who told me I looked rather drab, adding another item on the skill tree. Before carrying on further into the crusade, I decided to buy myself a new robe design for 5 gold bars. Shamaru made another appearance, demanding that I bow before him, but of course I refused, just as I had before. I then took on Veppa, who spawned a load of black goo on the floor. Little did he know, I could do such a thing too, killing him with ease. Returning back to the base, I was summoned once again, but this time I was surprised to see it wasn't the one who waits, but someone else entirely, who honestly just spouted a load of nonsense. And as the end of day 52 drew to a close, I had managed to unlock the final Might of the Devout upgrade, before playing a wicked tune on the drums we had unlocked earlier. This reminded me very much of Guitar Hero. What a game. With a successful band session, I gained another Sin Serpent. I then paid Midas's cave a visit for the first time, and this guy turned out to be a little slime ball, as you will see later on. I then decided to sacrifice a follower, and in return, I received another talisman fragment.
No! What have I done? Oh my god, he gets turned into gold.
And then Midas told me that this wishing well could sometimes return more gold than thrown in, but first I would need to pay him 10 gold bars to be able to use it, so this would have to wait for now. Back at the base, while everyone was sleeping, I decided to craft my very own tent, because let's face it, we must be tired by now, as we haven't slept in 53 days. While doing some general ground maintenance, aka pooper scooping, I found another outfit blueprint, this time a maid's costume. I then headed back on another crusade, running into Shroomy, who seemed a little jealous that I had the crown. I was then stopped by Shamaru once more, where he turned another 2 followers against me, leaving me no choice but to kill the both of them. Just before I was about to take on another mini-boss, I came across my new favourite weapon once again. Ready for battle, I headed in to take on Harros, who was easily defeated. Jarul then informed me that he and his brother had managed to get separated when travelling through Darkwood, and asked if I could help him find him. So I headed into Darkwood, thankfully finding him pretty easily, but first I would need to take care of the nearby enemies. I then headed to Ratau's, where I decided to take on Shroomy at Knuckleborn, who was the hardest to defeat of them all. It took me 6 attempts to beat him, and eventually receiving another tarot card, which now meant I was only missing 3 more tarot cards. Back at the base, I held another band session, gaining another serpent, and then crafted the required gold bars for the wishing well. Before heading over to Midas, I then placed 350 gold into the well, but they then told me they were considering my offer and that I must return in 3 days' time. Judge Albright then informed me of a worrying rumour about Witness Argy's, that he's a spy sent from another cult. So I decided to go ask him a few questions, but he seemed like a pretty loyal follower to me. As day 57 drew to an end, I decided to unlock the mating tent, which was news to me as I didn't know you could do that in this game. Judge Albright was still convinced that Witness Argy's was not faithful to the cult, demanding that something is to be done. So I placed him in the prison to keep Judge Albright happy.
Sorry, mate.
Once I got round to releasing him, he took a swing at me, stealing some of my money in the process.
Did you just hit me?
I then headed back into Silk Cradle, releasing the final door to take on Shamaru, who turned into this ugly looking thing, but by this point I was a pro at Crusades and easily killed him on my first attempt, earning another Heart of the Heretics for my troubles. But our victory was short-lived, when the one who waits told me that I must lay down my life to him, and then headed to Midas's cave, where the gods of the gold accepted my offering, returning 437 gold coins, so not too bad a return on my investment. While there, I decided to sacrifice 3 more followers, Greenor, Pebgri, and Harass, to complete the Talisman Stone. This would turn out to bite me in the arse going forward. I then returned to the Crusade Hall, where the remaining chain broke on the door, revealing a glowing light behind. This is where I realised I shouldn't have just sacrificed my 3 followers to Midas.
Oh, it requires 20... Oh, no, and I just got rid of a load.
So now the mission was set. I needed to get another 9 followers as fast as possible, but before heading off on another crusade, I unlocked another fleece which replaced all of my red hearts with 1.5 times the amount of blue hearts. Heading back into Darkwood, I found my first follower to indoctrinate. Returning back to the Crusade Hall, Helop had another creature for me to buy, and of course I obliged. I then had a brainwave, which are few and far between by the way. I realised I unlocked the mating tent a few days ago, and so I placed down one, as well as the hatchery. I then set up Beelzebub and Rajul on a little date. The next morning, I indoctrinated another follower. This now meant that we only needed 5 more followers, making another visit to Smuggler's Cove where I purchased another follower form. The next morning, Helop was back selling another creature. He was really coming in handy with getting his cult numbers back up. Looking to generate more sin, I placed down a bar and made a few brog brew. And it turns out Natri is a bit of a lightweight. 1 beer and he's professing his love for me. I then got my arse handed to me once again. And yes, you guessed it, I still haven't worked out how to kill him yet. While exploring Anchor Deep, I found my first piece of lore before finding another follower to recruit. I also stumbled across this strange looking tree that returned random items after an offering is made. Back at the base the next morning, I tried to mate Witness Argy's and Julatron, but it wasn't meant to be. Turns out, Julatron took it pretty personal too, but just when I managed to get our follower numbers back up to 20, Junajul died of old age. And then Jujulbury asked me to kill Witness Argy's, which of course I turned down, losing 25 faith in the process.
No!
So I decided to hold a bonfire ritual to bring the faith levels back up before purchasing another follower form from Helob. While chilling in the base, I spotted Witness Argy's being a complete weirdo.
What is he doing? Oi!
With our follower form numbers now back up to 20, I headed back into the Crusade Hall to perform the ritual. I was then transported into the One Who Waits land, where I was presented with a choice of weapons, so I guessed things were going to get a little messy. I then made my way down the path towards the One Who Waits and his 2 angry looking cats. He then demanded that I lay down my crown and sacrifice myself to him, before imprisoning my followers. I was then presented with a choice, of course I refused, and with that refusal, Baal, one of the angry looking cats, decided he wanted to fight me, although he was easily taken care of using my special attack, and of course I expected nothing less than the other cat aimed to step in, who I also made light work of. Now all of that was left was the One Who Waits, who broke from his chains, but once again he was relatively easy to kill. Or so I thought. But it turns out this was just one half of the battle.
Oh no, I don't think this is it. Uh-oh, what the hell? Holy moly! It's it!
Just when I thought this game couldn't get any crazier, I am now fighting 3 floating eyeballs.
No, that's crazy.
As you can tell by my voice, I was pretty stressed out trying to dodge all these fireballs, which ended up getting the best of me. Dying once again, just when I was forgetting the feeling of disappointment. But I headed straight back into the fight, and this time I made it to the final fight with more health than last time. And with the final boss taken care of, I was rewarded with another loyal follower before we all crowded round and celebrated, finishing the game, or so I thought. Turns out there was an update that added more crusades where you could gain follower forms of the bishops of the old faith. When I returned to the base, I noticed that an egg had hatched into this cute little guy who had decided to name Buddy. Returning to the Crusade Hall, the door leading to the One Who Waits was blocked by a new mysterious character who tasked me with crusading once more, give peace to the bishops who are trapped between life and death. So of course I headed straight back into Darkwood, where I had my first run-in with Midas in the wild, and he robbed me. Remember I told you he was a slime ball? Well, this is why. I eventually managed to make my way to the end of the crusade to take on Amadeus II, who of course was easily killed, dropping a god tier. It turns out that I'd now need to run each crusade 4 times over once again to get the final bosses. Once back at the cult, Padultry was dissenting, so I took him to the prison and started the process of re-educating him. I then turned in the god tier to the new being, where I was tasked with giving him a name. But at the time I thought I was naming a weapon, so I decided to go with the name Slamagon, and if you've watched the show Chicago Fire, you will know the reference. I then handed over the god tier, and in return I could gain one of 4 items: a necklace, a follower form, talisman stone, or forgotten commandment stone. This time gaining a talisman stone fragment. On another crusade I ran into Ratau, who tasked me with making it through 3 rooms without taking any damage, which I easily managed to complete, and in return I was rewarded with a load of gold nuggets. I then defeated Barbatos once again and unlocked the blunderbuss mastery skill. Juma then told me that he wanted to eat a bowl of poop. Turns out most of these crazy buggers want to try it, each to their own I guess, but of course I'll do anything for a loyal follower. I then spread some positivity to the other members before cleaning up the base a little. I then turned in another god tier, this time gaining a forgotten commandment stone, and somehow I ended up breaking the bar. You were only able to craft 1 bar in this whole game, but somehow I ended up with 2. On day 71 not much happened, another follower hatched, I then completed another crusade, and with another skill point available I unlocked the skill Reindoctrination Stone. But he then told me that he was grown up and become a full-fledged cult member. I then turned in another eye to Plimbor, gaining another commandment stone fragment, before paying a visit to Sozo, who gave me a mushroom sculpture and tasked me with building one back at my base. So I did just that and then returned to Sozo, where he gave me another stone fragment, completing another talisman stone. With another skill point available I unlocked the morgue, as I had recently been returning from crusades to find dead bodies lying around the base. This would allow followers to clean them up also. I was then tasked with marrying a follower, and in the end we ended up marrying Witness Argives. At the end of the ritual I had realised that the followers had been leaving gold in a contribution box. I'm not sure how it took me until day 73 to realise this. Jajul then died of old age and we was now back to 18 followers. I then headed on another crusade where I found another tarot card, which now meant that we had collected all 43 cards in the game, before taking on Leshy once again, this time gaining ourselves our very own Leshy follower.
Oh, we got a little miniature form of Leshy.
Back at the base I had to break up a fight between Vepa and Pagri. Honestly, these guys were like children. I then officially indoctrinated Leshy into the cult and held the ritual of the bounty. Leshy then asked me to find his eye that he had lost in Darkwood, so I accepted and headed back in, finding it in the second room of the crusade, unlocking a new relic in the process. The next morning I completed another crusade, and this time finding a new page of lore, I then held another sermon, leveling up in the process, this time unlocking Curse of the Necromancer, and then Murno popped by to say hello, but clearly he had been on the booze. Looking to gain the achievement for hatching 5 eggs, I decided to try mate another 2 followers, successfully gaining another egg. I then headed back into the crusade hall, where our new friend Slamagon had got rid of the altar and relocated it with a daily dungeon. So of course I jumped straight into the dungeon. This consisted of multiple sections, each one held in a different land, but of course I ended up running into one of those enemies, and I still had not worked out how to kill it yet, dying to him once again. Embarrassing, I know.
I don't have to defeat it. How do you defeat that thing?
Returning back from the dungeon, I found a body in the morgue, so at least that worked, and then come across the biggest poop I've ever seen.
Holy moly, look at the size of that thing. Who has even done that?
And somehow Alon had managed to injure himself, so I sent him to the medical bay to heal up. I then headed back into Anura, freed another creature, defeated Gussian 2.0, and used another skill point to unlock Dagger Mastery, as well as unlocking propaganda speakers, which meant that followers worked 20% faster, which instantly made me regret not unlocking this sooner. I then placed a few around the base in the areas that the followers would be working. My lumberyard and stoneyard had once again broken, so I placed down a new one of each and queued up consecrated materials on the refinery. The next morning I spotted that Buddy was drunk. I'm not sure that he's the legal age yet, but let's just keep that one quiet, as we have all been there. I then spent the rest of the morning breaking up drunken idiots fighting one another. The cult was rather hungry, so I queued up a few meals within the kitchen. I then used the ritual of resurrection to bring back our good friend Gussian. Once again heading back into Anura, I made my way through and defeated Eligos, gaining another god tier. With all the beer drinking going on, I had managed to generate enough sin to unlock another temple upgrade, and then another follower had hatched, meaning that we was now 1 away from 5. I then decided to make Leshy and Pamadul, excited by the possibility of how this was going to turn out. When heading to turn in the god tier token, I had managed to roll too far forward into Slamagon, and oh boy was he not impressed. While trying to give Leshy a moon token so he would no longer sleep during the night, I accidentally sent him to jail, losing 15 faith in the process.
Oh no, I'm sorry Leshy.
But once released, I finally managed to hand over the necklace. I then placed down the wind turbine, making the crops grow even faster. Returning back into Anura, we took care of Zeppa, and then unlocked the Returning to Earth Doctrine, allowing me to turn dead followers into fertilizer. Yes, before you ask, you heard that right. Another one of the eggs had hatched, which now meant I had unlocked the achievement for hatching 5 eggs. I then refilled the poop silo and repaired a few of the beds, and then had to sacrifice Anna to gain access to Anchor Deep. But before heading inside, I used the ritual Glory Through Toil, meaning that followers will work through 3 days and nights without getting tired. While back inside Anura, I come across the lighthouse keeper and these little mushroom fellas arguing, so I decided it was only right to break it up with a little brute force. Pressing on, I made it all the way to take on Hecate for the second time, and of course, you guessed it, I killed him, gaining another bishop to our cult. Once back at the base, Hecate asked me to find his throat and that it had been lost within Anura. I'm not sure how you lose your throat, but there you go. So I headed back into Anura for the final time, making my way through, eventually finding it in Chamak's dungeon. I then unlocked another skill point, this time reducing the cost of rituals by 50%, something I probably should have done a while back. I then headed into Ankadeep, where I was once again stopped by Midas, who managed to mug me once again, before killing Habrim for the final time. By this point the crusades were pretty easy, and I was rushing to try and gain all the bishop followers forms before the end of the 100 days. So of course, with the pressure now on, I headed straight back into Ankadeep, where I needed to run it another 3 times. Finding another page of lore in the process, I then run into a familiar face. Ah, Blimbo! I then declared a new doctrine, the Rite of Lust, and well, let's just say it was an eventful ritual.
Holy moly, it's around the tree.
Since placing down the morgue, I had forgot to check it, eventually finding 3 dead followers waiting to be buried. But I decided I would build the human composter. This way, I could at least get something out of them after their death. So I grabbed the body from the morgue and placed them in. Let me tell you, it does the job pretty quick. Heading back into Ankadeep, I came across the wishing tree once again, and of course I placed a few offerings inside, gaining a few more items in the process. And it was at this point when I realised exactly how to kill this pain in the arse. It turns out you had to hit this orb back at him. I'm not sure how it was so easy, yet it took me so long to work out, but somehow I still managed to die. I'll place the blame on the stupid orb slinger, as he'd managed to get my health pretty low. I then unlocked Axe Mastery, increasing the damage and range within a crusade, before queuing up as many bowls of food as I possibly could craft. Heading back into Ankadeep, I ran into Fornius once more, but this time, as I had now unlocked all the doctrines, there was no more fragments to be had. Instead, I chose to receive a big gift. I then unlocked Outhouse 2, increasing the capacity of the toilet, and then declared a new doctrine, allowing me to use the confession booth to generate sin instead of faith. So looking to gain another serpent, I pulled in Buddy to the confession booth for a little chinwag, but unfortunately he didn't level up in the process. Looking to unlock Silk Cradle, it required a level 10 follower, and it just so turned out Buddy is our only follower high enough, but I couldn't bring myself to sacrifice him just yet.
Oh man, I'm so sorry, buddy. No.
Heading back into Ankadeep instead, where I ran into Rattau once more, who had another challenge for me, this time tasking me with making my way through the next 3 rooms without dodging. And of course I kept my fingers well clear of the dodge button on my controller, as I was not prepared to fail this challenge, gaining more gold coins as a reward. I then ran into my arch nemesis once again, but this time I had his number, not losing a single bit of health in the process, eventually making it all the way through to take on Two-Face, killing him with ease, meaning that we now only had Shamaru to defeat. Back at the base, Buddy told me that he would dedicate himself to me forever, and asked me to make him one of my disciples. Way to make a guy feel bad, Buddy. So I did just that, before sacrificing him to unlock the entrance to Silk Cradle.
Oh my god, I feel so bad.
I then took another trip to see Plimbo, turning in another eye, in return for another talisman fragment. And while exploring the area, I found this little critter. Not sure how I didn't notice him before, gaining my very own crab follower form. Returning back to the base, I now had enough sin to upgrade the temple once again, as well as changing its appearance to this, which of course is more fitting for a murderous cult. I then queued up more meals, collected the devotion from the shrine, and accepted a quest from Mona to perform the ritual, Glory Through Toil. And of course, I'm not going to turn down free work from my followers. While inside Ankadeep, Pagre died, and somehow Kalamar became terrified. Not sure how, seeing as this idiot was part of a murderous regime. I then run into Midas once more, and of course he robbed me, but this time I was able to get my revenge, beating the crap out of him, gaining back 757 coins in the process. I then unlocked the final door to take on Shamaru, where of course I came out victorious, now meaning that I managed to collect all 4 bishops, and with that I paid another visit to Slambergen, who hailed me the god of death, rewarding me with another fleece. Back at the base, and with the 100 days winding down, I repaired a few beds, cleaned up the morgue as I had forgotten all about it once more, and then sentenced Shamaru to prison as he had begun to descend. I also finally got round to building the tailor shop, which was basically a little mini game, whereby you had to hit the button at the right time as the wheel span, before heading back into Ankadeep to find Kalamar's ear, finding it once again in Shimak's dungeon. Upon my return, Shamaru had also asked me to find his skull. Again, how do you manage to lose your skull? And of course, Shimak was the keeper of such a thing. I then went in search of another relic, finding it behind Plimbo's fish, before calling it a night, where I woke up to day 100. I then collected devotion from the shrine for the final time, and as day 100 drew to a close, there was nothing more fitting than for the cult to hold one final ritual, feasting on one of our own, because all cults are crazed cannibals, right?
See you later, bud. Oh my god.
And with that, my journey as a cult leader has come to an end. If you have liked this video, please don't forget to drop a like and subscribe, as I would like to grow my own low cult of followers on YouTube.